She stepped into the showroom wearing worn-out sneakers, faded jeans, and a simple gray hoodie. Her hair was tied back in a loose bun, and not a single designer label could be found on her. To the staff of Sterling Elite Motors, she looked like someone who had wandered in by mistake. "Ma'am, this dealership might be out of your price range," the manager smirked, barely hiding his contempt. "The vehicles here start at $250,000. Everyone chuckled as she quietly turned around and left, humiliated, dismissed, and judged without a second glance. What they didn't know was that Rachel Myers wasn't lost. She came looking for a birthday gift for her sister, one who had just survived cancer. What they really didn't know was who her husband was. The next morning, the sound of a Lamborghini Revuelto pulling up silenced the entire building. The man who stepped out wasn't just powerful, he was the man behind one of the world's leading AI tech empires. He had one thing on his mind, not revenge, but a lesson they'd never forget. Sometimes, the people you look down on are the very ones who hold the power to change your life. Would you like a voiceover version of this too? Rachel Myers never cared much for appearances. At 36, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen the world at its best and its worst. Her days were spent not in boardrooms or shopping sprees, but in classrooms, hospitals, and community centers. She was the founder of the Myers Foundation for Childhood Recovery, an organization that had, for over a decade, provided therapy, shelter, and hope for children overcoming trauma and loss. Before she married Nathaniel King, the tech billionaire known for revolutionizing AI-driven medical diagnostics, Rachel had already built her name and her mission. She believed deeply that status meant nothing without substance. And while she had access to unimaginable wealth now, she deliberately chose to live simply, to stay grounded in the work that truly mattered to her. When she walked into Sterling Elite Motors, she wasn't looking to impress anyone. She was searching for something meaningful, a birthday gift for her older sister, Lily, who had just finished her final round of chemotherapy. It had been a long, brutal journey, and Rachel wanted to give her something extraordinary, a symbol of survival, strength, and celebration. A sleek silver Lamborghini Huracan Evo Spider had caught her eye the moment she saw it online. Not for herself, but for Lily, whose childhood dream was to feel the wind in her hair behind the wheel of a supercar. Rachel could afford it without blinking, but she didn't arrive in a chauffeur-driven car or designer heels. She arrived as herself. But in a world obsessed with image, the people at the dealership didn't see the woman. They only saw the hoodie, the scuffed sneakers, and the assumption that she didn't belong. And in that moment, Rachel felt something she hadn't in years, not anger, but disappointment. Because this wasn't just about her. It was about every person who had ever been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed for not looking the part. They didn't know who she was. But they were about to find out. The scent of leather and polished metal filled the air as Rachel stepped into the sleek, glass-walled showroom of Sterling Elite Motors. Bright lights shimmered off the spotless chrome of luxury vehicles, names like Aston Martin, McLaren, Bugatti, and Lamborghini displayed like museum pieces. No one greeted her at first. In fact, several salesmen glanced her way, saw the hoodie, the scuffed sneakers, and promptly turned back to their screens or conversations. She took a few steps toward the silver Lamborghini Huracan Evo Spider that had drawn her in. It sat on a raised platform near the center, elegant, aerodynamic, daring. Her sister would love it. "Can I help you, miss?" a young associate finally approached, his name tag reading Eli. Rachel offered a warm smile. "Yes. I'm interested in that Huracan. I'd like to learn more about it." Before Eli could answer, a man in a tailored gray suit with slicked back hair and too much cologne swooped in like a hawk. "Thank you, Eli. I'll take it from here." He turned to Rachel, flashing a tight, polished smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm Derek Winston, sales manager here. That particular model," he said slowly, as if speaking to someone with limited understanding, "starts at $289,000, and that's before customization." Rachel nodded. "Yes, I saw that online. I'm looking to make a purchase today." Derek's smile wavered for a brief second, then returned, sharper this time. "Ah," he said, glancing down at her sneakers. "Well, we typically schedule private consultations for serious buyers interested in that range of vehicle. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable browsing our certified pre-owned section. It's a few blocks down." Rachel tilted her head slightly. "I'm not looking for a used car. I'm looking for that one." Derek's posture stiffened. "I understand. But as I said, that model is appointment only. We reserve viewings for clients who, how do I say this, match the profile." Around them, a few salespeople snickered quietly, trying, and failing, not to stare. Rachel's calm began to wear thin, but she remained composed. "And what profile is that, exactly?" she asked, her voice steady. Derek's eyes swept over her clothes with undisguised condescension. "Let's just say we cater to a high-caliber clientele, Miss Myers." Rachel Myers. "Well, Miss Myers, I have clients arriving shortly. Perhaps you could take a brochure. Eli can get you one." He gestured dismissively. Rachel looked past Derek and watched as he turned with artificial warmth toward a couple who had just walked in, dressed in designer clothing, sunglasses perched atop styled hair. "Mr. and Mrs. Langston. A pleasure as always." Derek beamed, immediately leading them toward the very car he had just claimed was unavailable. He opened the driver's side door for the woman with a dramatic flourish. Rachel stood still, watching. When Eli returned with the brochure, his cheeks were red. "I'm really sorry. That's not how we usually, well, it's not how he stumbled over his words. "I know," Rachel said softly. "It's not your fault." But her voice carried further than she intended. Derek heard it. He looked over sharply. "Is there a problem?" "Yes," Rachel said calmly, stepping closer. "You told me that car required an appointment. Now you're offering it to someone else, who just walked in." "Miss Myers," he said sharply, walking toward her and lowering his voice, "you're making a scene. This is a professional environment." "I'm speaking quietly," she replied. "You're the one who's suddenly defensive." Derek leaned in, no longer hiding the disdain in his voice. "Let's be clear. You walked in here wearing a hoodie and sneakers, asking to buy a $250,000 car in cash. I deal with dreamers like you all the time. This place isn't for you. You're wasting my time." A hush fell over the nearby area. Customers nearby paused mid-conversation. One of the Langstons shifted awkwardly. Rachel stood her ground, her spine straight, her hands relaxed at her sides. "And how many real buyers have you turned away simply because they didn't dress the part?" she asked. Derek chuckled bitterly. "People who can afford these cars know how to present themselves. And frankly, if you're serious, come back with proof of funds. And maybe a different wardrobe." Rachel's heart pounded, not from humiliation, but from something deeper. A quiet, righteous anger she'd learned to channel over years of watching the world dismiss the vulnerable, the underprivileged, the quietly powerful. She looked him straight in the eyes. "Got it," she said simply. "You've made yourself, and your dealership, very clear." She turned and walked out, the glass doors closing silently behind her. What no one noticed was the small smile forming on her lips. Not bitter. Not triumphant. But knowing. Because the people inside Sterling Elite Motors had just made the costliest assumption of their lives. And tomorrow, they'd come to understand exactly how much that assumption would cost. The next morning, the sun cast long, golden beams across the gleaming windows of Sterling Elite Motors. Inside, the team prepared for another day of luxury sales. The espresso machine hissed. Polished shoes clicked against tile. And Derek Winston, as always, adjusted his tie with practiced precision. Yesterday's incident with the delusional hoodie woman had already become a joke he shared with colleagues over drinks. Wanted to pay cash, he'd laughed. I almost asked if she had it folded up in her backpack. At 10:07 a.m. sharp, the quiet hum of conversation was abruptly silenced by the unmistakable roar of an engine outside. Heads turned. The vehicle that pulled into the dealership's private front entrance wasn't just another luxury car. It was a custom jet black Lamborghini Revuelto, its matte finish catching and swallowing the morning light. Sleek, aggressive, and effortlessly commanding, it slid to a stop with the grace of a predator. A suited chauffeur stepped out from the driver's seat and circled to open the passenger door. From inside emerged a man the staff didn't recognize, but instinctively knew they should. He stood tall, calm, and dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His silver-streaked hair was immaculately groomed. There were no security guards, no assistants. Just presence. Derek's instincts kicked in. This was the kind of client you didn't just serve, you catered to. He moved quickly across the showroom floor, flashing his best smile. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to Sterling Elite Motors. Derek Winston, sales manager. I'd be more than happy to assist you personally." The man gave a polite nod. His voice was low, steady. "My name is Nathaniel King." Derek blinked. The name tickled something in the back of his mind, but he couldn't quite place it. Nathaniel continued, "I'm here about a vehicle my wife looked at yesterday. The Huracan Evo Spider. Silver. Driver's side display. She was told it wasn't available." Derek's grin flickered. "Ah, of course. That model is quite popular. And if I'm not mistaken, your wife's name would be Rachel Myers." Silence. Derek's confident expression froze, his brain now racing to connect the dots. Hoodie. Sneakers. Calm voice. Silver Lamborghini. Oh no. Mr. King, there must have been a miscommunication. I wasn't aware. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "You weren't aware of your own behavior?" he asked, voice even. By now, the dealership owner, Mr. Bradley Stone, had emerged from his office, sensing the tension. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, looking between them. Nathaniel turned to him calmly. "Are you the owner?" "Yes," Stone replied. "Bradley Stone, at your service." "Good," Nathaniel said. "Then allow me to be direct. Yesterday, my wife came here, interested in a gift for her sister, a cancer survivor. She was met with open mockery, dismissed based on her clothing, and humiliated in public." Bradley's face paled. Derek's voice cracked as he jumped in. "Mr. King, I assure you, that's not representative of how we treat our customers. We value everyone." "Do you?" Nathaniel interrupted. "Because from what I was told, you decided she wasn't the right profile. That she should visit your used car lot instead." Around them, the room had gone still. The other staff, Eli among them, stood frozen. Even the customers had stopped browsing, sensing the shift in energy. Derek stammered, "Had I known who she was." Nathaniel stepped forward. "That's the point, Mr. Winston. You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with decency." His voice remained calm, but the weight behind it filled the room. "I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to set things straight." Bradley cleared his throat, desperate to recover. "Of course, Mr. King. We deeply regret the misunderstanding. We'd still be honored to serve your family. And, if you're still interested in the Huracan, I'm sure we can arrange something special." Nathaniel nodded slowly. "I am still interested." Derek exhaled in relief. "But not just for the Huracan," Nathaniel continued. "I was originally planning to purchase a new fleet of vehicles for my firm. 7 in total. Along with a few additions to our personal collection." Derek's eyes lit up. Bradley smiled wide. "And I was going to do it here," Nathaniel said, his voice colder now. "But after yesterday, I'm reconsidering. Not out of spite. But because character matters." He turned to Eli, the young salesman who had tried to help Rachel. "You treated my wife with respect when others didn't. You listened. You didn't judge. I'd like you to handle the paperwork for the Huracan. And if I decide to proceed with the fleet, it'll be through you." Eli's eyes widened. Me? Sir, thank you. Nathaniel nodded. Mr. Stone, he said to the owner, perhaps consider providing your staff with training in implicit bias and customer dignity. I know several excellent consultants. Bradley nodded stiffly. Yes. Of course. And as for you, Mr. Winston, Nathaniel turned back to the now pale-faced manager. I believe Rachel left you with a very clear message yesterday. Now let this be mine, respect should never be conditional. He paused. And assumptions? He looked toward the gleaming cars. They can be very, very expensive. Without another word, Nathaniel turned toward the silver Huracan, where Eli now stood beside it with shaking hands. He ran his palm along the hood, then smiled quietly. Yes. My wife has excellent taste. That evening, Rachel sat on the porch of their countryside home, a soft breeze brushing through the trees as the sun began its descent. She cradled a mug of herbal tea between her hands, letting the quiet seep into her bones. Despite the events of the past 2 days, her heart wasn't heavy with anger, it was stirred by something deeper. Nathaniel stepped out, 2 glasses of wine in hand. He handed one to her without a word and sat beside her, their silence comfortable, familiar. He looked like he'd seen a ghost, Nathaniel said softly, referring to Derek Winston. Rachel smiled faintly. It wasn't about scaring him. It was about making him pause. Rethink. She gazed out toward the horizon. I wasn't humiliated yesterday because someone didn't think I could afford a car, she continued. I've faced worse. But I walked out of that place thinking, how many people go through this kind of judgment every single day? And how many of them walk away believing it? Nathaniel nodded slowly, listening. I had the privilege to walk out and prove them wrong, Rachel said, her voice quiet. But what about the single mother working 3 jobs? The young student looking to test drive their first car? The cancer survivor just hoping for a joyful moment after a long fight? What if they're told they don't belong, just because of how they look? Nathaniel reached over, resting his hand gently on hers. You've always seen people for who they are, he said. Not what they wear. Not what they earn. That's what makes you powerful. Rachel gave a small laugh. If only the world ran on that same principle. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair. Maybe it can. Maybe not overnight. But it starts with small shifts. A conversation. A lesson. Even an uncomfortable one. She nodded, her gaze thoughtful. You know, she said, part of me didn't want to go back at all. Just buy the car somewhere else and move on. But I kept thinking about that young man, Eli. He treated me like a person, not a paycheck. Which is why he'll probably have a better career than his boss, Nathaniel added. Rachel smiled. Exactly. I didn't want to punish a whole place for one person's prejudice. But I did want to shine a light on it. Because if no one says anything, it keeps happening. Nathaniel lifted his glass slightly in a quiet toast. To shining a light. She clinked her glass against his. To seeing people clearly. A long silence followed, not awkward but full, like the pause between breaths when a lesson settles into the soul. Back at Sterling Elite Motors, the air had changed too. That same evening, Derek Winston sat in his office long after closing. For the first time in years, he wasn't reviewing numbers or closing deals. He was staring at his own reflection in the dark glass, replaying everything in his mind. He had believed himself to be a professional. Sharp. Discerning. Successful. But he had failed the most basic test of character, how he treated someone when he thought they had nothing to offer him. And it stung. Not because he'd lost a massive sale. But because the mask had been pulled off, and he didn't like the man underneath. Meanwhile, Eli sat in the break room, a quiet grin on his face as he reviewed the purchase paperwork. He didn't say much to his coworkers that night. But he didn't have to. The energy around him had shifted. People noticed. A new example had been set, not by preaching, not by punishment, but by presence. Rachel and Nathaniel hadn't demanded retribution. They had offered perspective. And that, more than any flashy revenge, was what truly changed the room. Respect should never be earned through wealth, and dignity should never be denied by appearance. We all carry the power to lift others, or quietly diminish them. But as Rachel showed us, the strongest voice in the room isn't always the loudest. Sometimes, it's the one that speaks calmly, and still changes everything. 3 weeks later, the grand ballroom of the Orchid Bay Foundation Hall was buzzing with quiet excitement. Guests in evening gowns and tailored suits mingled beneath sparkling chandeliers. But unlike most high society galas, this one felt different. The focus wasn't on fashion or fame, but on impact. On the children who had found hope, healing, and strength through the work of the Myers Foundation for Childhood Recovery. Among the volunteers moving gracefully through the crowd, passing hors d'oeuvres, refilling water glasses, adjusting wheelchairs, was a man in a plain black uniform and a name tag that read, Derek. Gone was the luxury suit, the air of superiority, and the polished arrogance. Tonight, Derek Winston was not a sales manager. He was a helping hand. At first, he had agreed to volunteer out of obligation, a gesture to save face after the incident. But what began as damage control quietly evolved into something unexpected. The children, so full of resilience, humor, and life, had disarmed him. Their honesty left no room for ego. Their strength made his daily worries feel embarrassingly small. He had listened to stories that didn't make headlines, of kids learning to walk again, to speak again, to believe again. And something in him began to shift. Near the back of the hall, Rachel stood in a simple navy dress, her hair in a soft braid. She watched Derek from across the room, how he knelt to tie a child's shoe, gently guided a boy in a wheelchair toward the stage, and offered words of encouragement to a nervous teen about to speak in front of hundreds. She hadn't said more than a polite hello since the day he walked into the first volunteer shift. But tonight, she crossed the room and greeted him with a kind, steady smile. Mr. Winston, she said softly. He turned, startled. Mrs. Myers. He paused, straightened slightly. I want to say, thank you. For not just dismissing me. For letting me be here. Rachel looked at him carefully. You've changed. That's something only you could do. He nodded slowly. I used to think success was about reading people. Spotting the real buyers, the ones who fit. I didn't realize how blind I was. Rachel tilted her head, her voice gentle. What do you see now? Derek glanced around the room, the parents holding back tears of pride, the volunteers chatting with kids in walkers, the boy he had just helped now laughing with a group of donors. I see people. Not profiles. Just people. Rachel smiled. That's a good start. A pause. Then Derek added, quieter now, and I'm sorry. Truly. Not just for how I treated you, but for how many others I must have dismissed over the years without ever realizing it. Rachel placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. It's not about being perfect, she said. It's about being willing to grow. At that moment, Nathaniel joined them, his presence as calm and grounded as ever. He extended a hand toward Derek. I hear you've been doing good work. Derek shook it firmly. Trying my best, sir. Nathaniel nodded. Eli tells me you've been mentoring him back at the dealership. Says things feel different. We started training all new hires on Dignity First service, Derek said. No assumptions. Just conversation. I'm glad to hear it, Nathaniel replied. Because as it turns out, the fleet order I was holding off on? We're ready to move forward, with someone who's earned our trust. Derek's eyes widened. You'd let me handle it? Nathaniel smiled. Only if you keep showing up for the people who don't always look like buyers. Derek looked between the couple, visibly moved. I won't let you down. Rachel touched his arm. You already started making it right. Just keep going. Later that night, as children took the stage and shared stories of triumph, of beating odds, finding community, and daring to dream again, Derek stood quietly near the back, applauding with everyone else. But inside, something had shifted forever. He understood now. Redemption isn't about wiping the slate clean. It's about earning back your place, one act of humility, one honest effort at a time. And perhaps most importantly, it's about seeing the person in front of you before the price tag, the clothing, or the title. We all make mistakes. But it's what we choose to do after, the apology, the growth, the quiet effort, that defines who we really are. Respect isn't a luxury. Dignity isn't a privilege. They're human rights. And when we offer them freely, sometimes the world softens. And so do we. Have you ever been judged by how you looked, before anyone knew who you were? Or maybe, in a moment you regret, you misjudged someone else? We all carry stories like that, quiet moments that shaped how we see the world. Moments that taught us to be kinder. To listen longer. To look deeper. We'd love to hear yours. Share your story in the comments below. Whether it's a time you were underestimated, or a time you learned to see someone in a new light. Your experience might inspire someone else to do the same. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join our growing community of story lovers. Together, we can remind the world. Respect should never be earned, it should be given freely. We'll see you in the next story. And until then, keep seeing the good in people,